We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
I think I'm brainworms. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Archaeo Animals. I'm your host, Alex Fitzpatrick, and with me as always,
Simona Falanga.
And first of all, I want to make a really special announcement. I have eaten dinner before we recorded. It's a momentous day. I'm not hungry, so I won't be dying during this recording.
That's right, because some of the animals we'll be discussing are not exactly the ones we'd associate with dinner normally.
True, and what are we discussing today, Simona?
We will be looking at native and introduced animals in the archaeological record. More specifically, all the animals that you presumed have always lived in your country, but are actually from somewhere else.
Which will be great, because I really don't know any animals that live in Britain still.
That's right. As per usual, there'll be a lot of British archaeology, and also, like, big sort of, well, not a disclaimer, there's going to be a lot of Roman archaeology.
Which is good, because that means you just talk.
Oh, no, sure you won that. But yeah, lots of Romans. So if you hate the Romans, I guess skip this episode, because Romans everywhere.
Well, I mean, really, skip the whole podcast, because I think you bring up Romans in every episode. Oh, don't skip the podcast, though. I'm doing a really bad job at, promoting us.
I'm the involuntary Roman archaeologist.
Yeah. Anyway, so before we start, as always, want to give, a bit of a breakdown of what we're actually talking about. So, what makes the animal native as opposed to introduced? Not everyone probably knows those kind of terms. So just kind of break it down. An animal that's native to a region is a species that existed within the bioregion through a natural source rather than a human-induced one. So they had been living there for, a certain amount of time consistently.
But then, because an issue with sort of whether an animal is native or introduced is that the definition also depends on who you talk to. Because sometimes if a species has been introduced by anthropogenic factors, but has been consistently supporting itself by its own means over a period of time, then that tends to get classed as native. I mean, we'll cover it in a bit later, but one of the animals that is classed as a native British mammal is the rabbit. As you will find out, the rabbit is not from Britain, but it has been here for so many thousands of years that it's almost as if it was, if that makes sense. So,
like all science, there is absolutely no consistency in our terminology.
Surprise!
Yay! Nothing is ever easy. But just to kind of give you a better idea of what native animals are, for those of you in Britain, some animals that are native to Britain include the roe deer, the red deer, the European hedgehog, the red squirrel, and the common shrew. And I want to, side note, I did not realize there were squirrels in Britain.
Excuse me?
Wait, you didn't realize that we had squirrels? Right, okay. This show is a bit weird because, let's see, Simona's never had chili, and Alex has never... Please tell me you've seen a squirrel in Britain.
I've never seen a squirrel in Britain. I don't think I have.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm pretty sure I haven't.
Huh? Right, have you ever been to a park?
Yeah, but I've seen, birds. I don't think I've ever seen
there's squirrels.
I don't think I've ever seen a squirrel.
So you've never even seen a grey squirrel?
No.
Look, I can understand if you've never had squirrel chili. I mean, that makes sense, but you've never seen squirrel? Oh, it's weird.
I'm pretty sure... Full disclosure, the flu is going around in my household, so I might just be completely out of it. But I'm pretty sure I've never seen a squirrel.
Next you'll be telling me you've never seen a haggis.
No, don't.
And those are native to Scotland.
It wasn't me, but I will say that there's someone that I know who I've dug with who we said a haggis was an actual animal, and she believed us. Just, that's all I'm going to say. Archaeologist.
But like, if you don't know any better, you don't know any better. One leg's shorter than the other and all that.
That's another episode of Zoo Arc.
What else do you not think is like... Okay, right. Like, do you think raccoons exist in the UK? Because raccoons we don't have.
Yeah, I've learned that because I kind of assumed that they were here, and then my partner had to tell me that I was wrong.
So wait. You thought raccoons were here, but squirrels were not.
I was always under the impression, I swear to God, I think someone told me once that there were no squirrels in Britain. And I guess I've just kind of internalized that so much that I now have squirrel blindness, where I can't see squirrels if they're like in front of me in Britain.
So you're like the opposite of that dog.
Yeah. Wow, I can't believe I've been put on blast.
Yeah, well, that's what this show is about, isn't it? You put me on blast, I put you on blast. That's kind of what we do.
All right, getting back on track now. So now that we talked about native animals and the fact that there are squirrels in Britain, we can now talk about introduced species. So as you can probably guess, introduced species are basically what the name says. They've been introduced usually by human means, specifically by human activities. It can be intentional. There's a lot of examples of history where people have brought, domesticated animals over when they've migrated, even stuff like pets. But it can also be unintentional stowaways, which, like you'll see in some of our examples later on in the episode.
So we'll be covering sort of more in the next segment some examples of species that have been introduced either intentionally or otherwise to Britain and other countries. But I guess one point I should probably be making here, that a lot of the species that we'll be discussing we have previously covered in other episodes, so feel free to go back to those episodes if you wish to know more information about them. But I guess one of the main ones for Britain anyway, of like introduced animals, sometimes we have some introduced species that are almost like quasi-global in the way that they can now be found pretty much everywhere around the globe. And some of those include so the most known domesticates, looking here at sheep, which were brought over, well, they're pretty much worldwide now, and they were brought over specifically to Britain during the Neolithic, as the animal with its wild ancestor actually originates from Central Asia. The same with goats, which were domesticated so around the Middle East and were also introduced to Britain during the Neolithic. And the same applies for cattle, actually, because even though as we've discussed previously, the ancestor of the cattle, the aurochs, was present in Britain, some studies have shown that the cattle that was present in Britain had actually been domesticated elsewhere and then brought to Britain. Not to say that they probably haven't attempted and succeeded to domesticate aurochs in Britain, but it probably didn't take off as much as just bringing in the finished product, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we have your other favorite example, which are cats.
The kitty cats that are also, well, not native to Britain. That, again, as we discussed, unfortunately, we're going to be repeating ourselves a bunch in this episode. The cat is the domesticated version of the Felis sylvestris libica, which is the African wildcat. While there is a cat that is native to Britain, the Felis sylvestris, so the European wildcat, that is not the species that was tamed and domesticated. It was actually its African subspecies that was. So the domestic cat itself was introduced to Britain, most likely during the late Iron Age, early Roman period, and also elsewhere in Europe, the most notable example being in Cyprus, where there were like no cats native to the island at all, and all of a sudden a cat pops up next to a human burial, within a human burial, thus suggesting that the animals were indeed purposely introduced by ship to the island.
Which is more common than you'd think, what I've found out kind of during researching this. I actually have a question for you, Simona. Because I actually realized I didn't look this up, so this is me just not doing my research well. But with these kind of domesticated animals, do you know if they're just now considered like like naturalized species, or are they still considered introduced?
I think they're sort of, again, I think it depends very much on who you talk to, but I'm pretty sure like sheep are considered sort of as a native species of Britain. It's almost like by the sheer amount of sheep that we have in this country is almost like, I wouldn't go as far as saying a national symbol, but it's something you associate with Britain because there is a lot of sort of sheep farming going on. But I guess it depends who you talk to.
Yeah, it's really confusing, actually. I think after a while, I started getting into a weird like brain loop of thinking about this, of just like, okay, so do you go that far back to kind of consider animals that are native, or do you have to consider like, oh, they've been here for like 1,000 years, I guess we can call them native now? It's like a weird like taxonomy kind of system that I think at the end of the day just kind of makes me more confused. But then again, it's me, so.
Well, it is. I remember having, I know we're going to cover it in the next segment into more detail, but I was having like years ago a sort of in-depth discussion with someone specifically about the fallow deer. Again, as we've covered before, the fallow deer was sort of, well, the fallow deer was actually present in Britain during the late Pleistocene, went extinct. The Romans introduce it to Britain. It sort of dies out with the Romans, and then we see it again fully established when the Normans came to Britain, and the population of fallow deer they introduced are what we find in Britain today. So to me, that would make it an introduced species. But then I was not arguing, but discussing with someone who was saying, well, no, they were here in the Pleistocene, thus they are native. There's been an interruption, like a hiatus, and that's how you pronounce it. They'll say, well, they weren't here, but then they were introduced, and it's sort of as they never left sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's again another one that we'll be covering, the wild boar. Because the wild boar is native to Britain. It was then hunted to extinction, and now it's been reintroduced. So do you now class the wild boar as an introduced species, or is it a native one? Because, of course, the population that is here today has no links to the population that was here in the medieval period when it went extinct.
Yeah.
Beta column A, column B.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I never really thought of like the kind of, I don't want to use the word politics because it's not the right word, but there's so much more complexity in terms of what's a native species and what's an introduced species. I always kind of considered it to be very cut and dry, you know, these were here when, you know, since the dawn of time. So they're obviously native species. These were clearly introduced when, you know, humans moved from here to there. So those are been introduced. But yeah, there's so many blips in time, it looks like, where we have lost a species and then have returned them to a region. So yeah, it's actually really interesting. But yeah,
if anything, it just it confirms the point that the collective noun for archaeologists should be an argument,
not a test pit. Or there's so many I've seen the last time, yeah. But that's the whole point, isn't it? Is that many roads lead to the same place. There are many ways of trying to figure out backwards.
I want that on a t-shirt or a poster. There are many pathways to the same direction. You're inspirational this evening.
To the same place.
Oh.
I feel like there should be a sunset in the background or like somebody surfing a wave, you know.
It should be one of those inspiration posters that you put in like a CEO's office.
Hang in there.
Hang in there, baby.
It gets better.
Does it?
You can just keep trying.
You'll find out after the
not if you're an archaeologist.
I love the demotivational posters are even better. Oh, love them. But yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing, is that like there's lots of, it's like all of archaeology is just a puzzle piece, you know.
Yeah.
But does it get better? I guess you'll find out in the next segment.
Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code ANIMALS. Looking to expand your knowledge of X-rays and imaging in the archaeology field? Then check out An Introduction to Paleoradiography, a short online course offering professional training for archaeologists and affiliated disciplines. Created by archaeologist, radiographer, and lecturer James Elliott, the content of this course is based upon his research and teaching experience in higher education. It is approved by the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists as 4 hours of training. That's in the UK, for those of you that don't know. So don't miss out on this exciting opportunity for professional and personal development. For more information on pricing and course structure, visit paleoimaging.com. That's PALEO imaging.com, and look for the link in the show notes to this episode.
And we are back, and let's get right into it, because I think if Simona has to wait another second, she might explode.
Yeah.
All right, let's barrel on through to the Simona's Roman Archaeology show.
Right. In terms like animals that you perhaps never thought might have come from elsewhere. Rabbits, not native. Although we do have some Iron Age examples, they were originally, supposedly, brought over by the Romans and then were established fully in the wild by the 12th century. Brown hair, also introduced. In the case of Britain, again, during the Iron Age. Not to be confused with the species of hair that is actually native to Britain, that being the mountain hare. Now, both rabbits and brown hares are part of a large interdisciplinary investigation headed by Naomi Sykes. I think we've discussed this before. It's the Easter Bunny Project.
Yeah. So we're going to, if Naomi's listening, first of all, hey, what's up? I would love to do a post with you. Second of all, she's kind of the zooarchaeology queen in terms of giant projects. So we'll be mentioning her projects a lot. You're welcome for the free promotions.
So,
like she needs it.
No, probably doesn't need it. Going down our list, rats, but that meaning the black rat, Ratus ratus, not to be confused with the brown rat. Again, introduced in the Roman period. The earliest examples around the 1st century, and then they had the experience of decline during the Saxon period, and the numbers rise again during the late Saxon period. House mouse. Again, that lovely little critter that gets it into your house when you don't really want it to. Not because it isn't cute, but because it does tend to have a tendency to sort of poop on all the things you love. That's also introduced.
Or die. Die in the kitchen wall where I can't get to it, and I just have to live with that for like 10 days.
Yeah, how dare you die so inconveniently, mouse?
It smelled so bad. I lived in a studio flat. There was no escaping that smell.
But wait, isn't that like a free reference skeleton for you?
I couldn't get it. Otherwise, I would have removed that thing. It was maddening.
And then, where was it? Was it stuck between the wall or something?
It was like behind it was behind something, and I couldn't get to it. It was a rented thing, so I couldn't dig a hole into it, which I wanted to do. So this is a call out for all house mice who decide to die in really hard to reach places. It's very inconsiderate. Think about your human friends and comrades who are living with you. Thank you.
Solidarity with our mouse friends, but obviously still bash the fish friends.
Exactly.
But also think of it hundreds of years down the line, would there eventually be an archaeological excavation of that studio flat, and they find the mouse inside the walls, it'd be like, oh, that's going to be some sort of ritualistic deposit to scare away mice from an alternate plane. It's like, oh.
Nah, it's just bane of my life. Anyway, house mice. What were you saying?
Also introduced, unlike the wood mouse, which is actually native to Britain, the house mouse originally came from the Middle East and came most likely as a stowaway to Britain in I'll have you guess. Really? In the Roman period.
I just want you to say it.
Romans!
This is your time to shine.
Oh, God. Though Iron Age examples exist, notably, as I think O'Connor explains in one of his papers, Coy identified some mouse remains at Danebury. So that may potentially be an Iron Age example. The issue with that is, I think, within the same deposit, there was rabbit that was definitely intrusive, or almost definitely intrusive. So, but, yeah, supposedly we may have an Iron Age example. While we're talking about rodents, the edible dormouse, also introduced, also by the Romans, because and that was very much deliberate, because it was viewed as a delicacy. So, hey. One point I wanted to make, I think, about sort of the introduction dates for rodents, that, of course, it is quite difficult to tell, because owing to the scarce recovery of rodent remains, because that's, because they're so small, you rely on sampling methods. Of course, hand collection methods will miss a lot of the remains due to their size. Also, if you do recover rodent remains, now, were they actually in situ, or are they the result of bioturbation? So an animal that much later on has burrowed into your archaeological feature and has, again, inconveniently died.
Archaeology would be so much easier if all these animals would stop being giant inconveniences to me personally. I'm just saying, I'm
just wondering, do we know, is there like a good difference between what I'm thinking, introduced mice? Are there any mice that are native to the UK? And then, we've talked before in episodes where it's quite difficult to differentiate the morphology in skeletal structure between quite similar species. So how would we actually know that something's an introduced mouse species rather than a native one?
Well, the wood mouse is native to Britain.
Well, exactly. If you paid attention, you would have known.
Yeah, we literally just said that maybe 5 minutes ago. What kind of producer are you?
Really? Did you actually? Oh, for God's sake. Right. I obviously zoned out.
Wow. You heard it here, folks. You heard it here, folks.
You didn't think squirrels existed in the UK, okay?
That was a whimsical little story that I told that was really funny, and you just put yourself out of the job market for producing stuff.
Oh, God. Why am I here?
I don't know. But in terms of morphology, I don't know about you, Simona, but I'm definitely the wrong person to ask about that. I'm just happy that I can tell the difference between rat and mouse bones every so often. But if it came to doing mouse by species, I would probably explode.
I'm not actually certain. I presume that because the house mouse, well, it's not necessarily a domesticated species or more of a synanthropic species. So that being one that sort of thrives on an artificial habitat and lives near and or around humans and benefit from their activity. So I don't think they would have had as much change in morphology as sort of domesticated species which we've selectively bred, because almost like the house mouse sort of selectively bred itself. Mm-hmm. So it could eat more of our grains.
I just realized I don't think we've done a rodents episode, have we?
Not yet, no.
Yeah, we should do that at some point and probably get David Orton, if you're listening. Hit us up. I know you're doing a lot of stuff with rats and stuff that I don't understand. So yeah, it would be great to have someone who actually knows about rodents, because clearly I don't.
Because I think with the wood mouse and the house mouse, because in terms of appearance, when they have all the squishy bits still on, it'll be a bit easier to tell them apart in terms of colouring of the coats and whatnot. But I'm not sure how that translates in terms of skeletal structure, because it's not something, again, it's something that doesn't pop up too often unless you're looking for it or you're sort of sieving or sampling. But if you're just hand collecting bone in just like sort of box standard excavation, you don't tend to find as much rodent remains.
Yeah, it's just it's like fish bones, where it's like, unless you're actively looking for it, you're probably gonna end up missing out on a lot of it because it'll get swept away with spoil heap and stuff. But moving on from rodents, I think you want to talk a little bit about.
I mean, there's the fallow deer again, which I think we've covered not 10 minutes ago. What I will say about it is, again, there's another research project which is headed by Naomi Sykes. That's looking at...
We love you, Naomi.
Yay! That's looking into the origins of the fallow deer and the distribution patterns as they were introduced by humans. So if you're interested in that, we're putting, again, a link in the show notes, and the name of the project is On the Trail of the Fallow Deer, funded by the AHRC.
It's extremely cool and very big. Yeah, it's very cool. And it's actually like, it probably answers a lot of the questions we had in terms of reintroducing species and stuff, because the fallow deer is such a weird case in terms of introduced species.
Well, yeah, there's probably going to be something about it in the methodology, which we should have read.
Yeah, but we did not.
So last or earlier archaeological example, bit of a honourable invertebrate mention, as I don't know enough to be talking about this, nor you possibly, but I thought I'd give it a try. So a little honourable mention, the Oryzothelius surinamensis, also known as the saw-toothed grain beetle. Now, the grain beetle, as in the name, is a stored grain pest. It's a synanthropic species, so as we've mentioned before, it lives near and or around humans and benefits from their activities. And it's just this little dark brown beetle that's got little, as you'd expect, saw-toothed projections that is found absolutely worldwide. Where there's grain, this guy's there. Now, as to where it actually comes from, I have no idea. I've tried to look it up, but it's just, as you find with a lot of, I believe, of stored grain pests, we don't know where they've actually originated from, but these species would actually not be able to survive in the wild, like outside of this man-made human habitats. But yes, this little guy, as you may have once again guessed, was introduced by the Romans. So, and if you know where it came from, please let us know.
I want to point out that, so a little bit behind the curtain here, we would type out notes collectively for these episodes. Simona wrote this down and I thought it was a joke.
Why?
I was just like, that's not a zooarch thing. I mean, it is technically, but...
Are they animals? Yes.
I mean, are we really going to get into it?
Oh, so she's hating on fish and
do we have like 2 hours?
She's hating on beetles too. Oh.
Listen, I find it...
Wait. Why are beetles not animals? I don't understand.
No, not that they're not animals. It's just, I don't know. I don't know where I was going with this.
Is it because they don't have internal skeletons? Is that what you're trying to tell us?
Maybe. I don't know.
It's part of...
It's not something I look
at. We apologize to the entomological community for the offense that they've been caused during this episode. We also want to reiterate that we do not hate the fish community either.
Except for me. I hate it. I don't care. I will never not care about how much I dislike fish, okay?
But beetles are cute.
They're okay. I was just surprised. In general, I was just surprised that was on the list of species we were talking about. Just felt a little out there. But to be fair, we do plan on doing a whole episode on kind of buggy things. Just completely out of our wheelhouse.
But yeah, just before we break off for this segment, just want to point out, I might be stating the obvious, but there's a trend to be seen here, sort of with introductions being mostly, happening in the Roman period, but starting off in the Iron Age as well. Because you see, they start, there were introductions prior to the Iron Age, but as the island was sort of more opening up for trade, as it did during the Iron Age, introductions started happening in larger numbers, and then culminating during the Roman period, where there was literally just so much traffic of like people and goods just going back and forth all the time, and that's just where almost the bulk of the species have been just thrown en masse into Britain. So it's an interesting trend to notice.
So all together now, thank you, Romans.
What have the Romans ever done for us?
I hate the Romans. I hate them being brought up. And it annoys me so much. I just don't care. And my other problem is that they are often used for by certain parts of the political establishment to kind of try and make the idea that Britain has been one nation for thousands of years. So that's why I also don't like them.
We want to apologize to any time-traveling Romans who are listening to this podcast. We don't mean to offend. Also, how did you get here? That's amazing that you're listening to a podcast.
Honestly, if a Roman listens to our podcast out of all the other podcasts, I'll be impressed. You know what? I will eat my hat.
And on that note, we should probably take a break and go on to our last segment.
You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to arcpodnet.com/shop for a link. That's arcpodnet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show.
Okay, we're back.
Mostly.
We're not going to talk about squirrels ever again on this podcast.
Oh, and on the next episode of Archaeoanimals, squirrels.
Oh, that'd be so mean to me. But we have so many more introductions to talk about, don't we? Well, not so many more. We have a bunch of recent introductions that we want to talk about, or at least mention.
Yeah, just again, a few honourable mentions of introductions that are not so much archaeological, but they are historical. And I guess it should just be titled Victorians Doing Things. Because one thing the Victorians did, they went places, they saw an animal, oh, that looks cute, I'm going to bring it back home. So, as for our recent introductions extravaganza, we now have in Britain the Chinese water deer, the muntjac deer, both from Southeast Asia, known because the males have quite big canines, and they kind of look like dragons. If you see one,
they're
not
so
hallucinating. Cool. They're a thing. They exist.
They're awesome, yeah.
Also, a recent introduction, the grey squirrel.
It's a recent introduction to me, okay?
Well, and they're an American species. That's now pretty much obliterated the native one. Redneck wallabies are a thing. They're here.
I didn't know that.
They're sort of
wait, what? What's a redneck wallaby?
It's a wallaby with a redneck.
It's a wallaby.
And they're grey squirrels, like redneck squirrels.
Shut up. Why do I talk on this podcast at all?
Right, so yeah.
Well, you're meant to be in charge of it. You should just tell me to be quiet.
So it won't work.
Anyway, redneck wallabies, also a thing, mostly escapees from petting zoos and again, Victorians doing things. We're not 100% sure about this, but there might be small pockets of Japanese raccoon dogs in Britain.
I love them.
For those who don't know what a Japanese raccoon dog is, it looks like the child of a dog and a raccoon, and they're the only canid that hibernates.
We need you to pause the podcast, go on Google, look up tanukis, and you're welcome, because it's great.
I'm actually literally looking up a Japanese raccoon dog right now. What is it?
It's a delight.
And also, if you do have the time, please look up sort of the folklore that they have in Japan surrounding the raccoon dog, because it is truly fascinating. But
please watch the film Pom Poko, because it's great.
Other recent introduction, the American mink. I believe what happened with the American mink is that they were kept in fur farms and they've been released into the wild, and now they've taken over. And also, just to mention one of, I'm sure, the many birds that were introduced, the rose-ringed parakeet, which is a small parrot that now lives everywhere.
Yeah, it's so weird.
And I've got one more introduced animal, though not to Britain, because it is native to Europe, but one that's been introduced pretty much worldwide is the sparrow, the little bird. Because the sparrow is native mainly of Europe and parts of Asia, and has been since introduced to the American continent, Australia, and Africa.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. Clearly from this episode, I don't know much.
No, so here's another one. That's one that I didn't know, and I was really surprised to find out about. Because, yeah, it might be a little known fact, or it might be to us sort of still in our 20s, that there used to be a quite substantial population of coipus in Britain. So the coipus is a large South American semi-aquatic rodent. So you can look it up, or just for you to picture it, again, it looks as if a beaver and a capybara had a child, and it will be a coipus. It's very cute. Unfortunately, as cute as it is, it's also stupidly invasive. So I think it first escaped into the wild in the 30s, again, escaping from fur farms, and it created a substantial population that was actually causing quite a bit of conflict with humans and crops with a burrowing behavior. So they've tried to tackle it to eradicate it, and it was successfully eradicated in the 1980s. So up until the late 80s, I believe 1989 was the last sighting, we had a massive rodent just wandering around. So yeah.
Now it's just me. I'm the massive rodent running around.
And again, there's a trend to be seen here as well for these more recent introductions, because there seem to be, again, either Victorians seeing something, oh, that's pretty, I'm going to bring it back to Blighty, and animals escaping from fur farm or being released from fur farms. So that's that.
Yeah. To kind of bring it even more closer to modern times, I guess, we figured we'd end this episode talking a bit about applied zooarchaeology, which I realized we haven't actually talked about on this podcast. To be fair, I actually really didn't know it existed till like a few months ago. But it's super cool, and it's awesome to see more archaeological things being applied to modern day stuff. So applied zooarchaeology is basically using zooarchaeological research to help out with conservation efforts. So through zooarchaeology, we can learn about what species were present and what habitats they had settled in here in Britain. And we can establish the reasons behind why they disappeared just through the archaeological record, and, figure out what went wrong. Was it overhunting? Was it habitat depletion, climate change? There's so many reasons why a lot of these species end up disappearing. But by using this kind of data in modern day conservation efforts, we can kind of make better informed choices in terms of are we going to reintroduce the species back into this region?
Yeah, because what we can do is use zooarchaeology to provide a pre-human baseline for this species, because we can use animal remains in the archaeological record to reconstruct not just past human societies, but also the wider environment. Because especially certain species, and especially thinking of many insects and amphibians for sure, they're incredibly susceptible to the smallest changes in the environment, and they are very specific niches. So the presence or absence of a particular species can actually tell us an awful lot about what the environment used to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And you also get, other species that are incredibly specialized in terms of what they eat. And again, I'm thinking of certain rodent species. So all of that as a sort of gigantic puzzle sort of brings us together a nice, lovely paleo-environmental reconstruction.
So I think we mentioned this earlier in the episode, but probably one of the best examples of kind of reintroduced species is, in fact, the wild boar, which was native. I guess, again, there's that thing, was native, is native.
Like, it is native, but then again, the population that is here now is not linked to the one that was native to Britain, even though I'm pretty sure, because I think the wild boar that is here now, I think, mostly came from sort of Germany, Central Europe, unless I'm much mistaken. But then again, is there really that much of a difference between a German wild boar and a British wild boar? It's a wild boar.
The accent.
Have you ever spoken to one?
Have you? Who hasn't?
I never know.
And you make fun of me for not ever seeing a squirrel. Meanwhile, you've never talked to a wild boar. I mean, come on.
No, this is getting very, how do I say it? Very Dr. Dolittle.
Oh, you knew my name? My real name?
Ha ha ha, very funny.
It's a very boring movie.
I speak to my animals all the time. We have beautiful conversations. But yes, the wild boar technically went extinct in Britain during the medieval period. Now, it was actually reintroduced several times after that, over from the medieval period, like right after it went extinct, up to the 17th century, where they sort of just went, yeah, all right, fine. And they stopped trying. Now, the current population escaped in the 80s from wild boar farms. Well, escaped / was released / nobody knows. But there's wild boar in Britain now. There's pockets in the southwest, in the southeast, some even in South Wales. And I think their biggest population is in the Forest of Dean in Gloucestershire.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I believe in Scotland they're still considered extinct. At least that's from what I understand, especially given that I work with loads of wild boar in assemblages from Scotland. So it is interesting that it's only really in some pockets of Britain that they're roaming the lands again.
Well, so in terms of introduction, actually, one that we've not covered is the pine marten. Because the pine marten also went extinct in Britain. I'm presuming, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it was overhunted, because again, fur. But it's been recently reintroduced in Scotland, I believe, and it's made its way down. So it's actually not too long ago, they've had a sighting in Derbyshire.
Oh, wow.
And they've noticed a link that actually the pine marten is, where the pine marten is present, there is a decline in grey squirrels, and so the red squirrel population is faring a little bit better. Now, I'm not sure if I'm remembering this 100%, so do call me on it in the comments. But what they were thinking is that because the grey squirrel is not used to the pine marten as a predator, historically, it doesn't recognise it as a danger. Or maybe it's not able to get away with as much dexterity as the red squirrel. I'm going to try and find the article and put it in the show notes.
Pine marten, just to remind me, is like a little rodent, like a ferret or stoat, or what is a pine marten?
It's a mustelid, if that's how you pronounce it. So it's the same family as the badger. So it looks like a sort of like a stoat, but much bigger.
Oh, okay.
And I don't think I've ever seen a stoat.
I saw a man with a pet stoat one time.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen... I don't think I pay attention to the outdoors.
It certainly doesn't sound like it.
I work with dead animals for a living.
When was the last time you saw sunlight?
What's the sun? I'm writing up my PhD right now, so I'm kind of indoors all the time.
And now the time has finally come for Alex to explore the great outdoors, and we must thus end this episode of Archaeoanimals.
I think we should continue outdoors. That's what needs to happen. Alex has to have some recordings from the field to prove that she goes outside.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to go outside.
I would love it. So the next time you're in like a wooded area and you just see hundreds of squirrels and you're like, this is where they all are. They're all in the same place. That's why I never saw them.
Yeah, you don't know. You don't know where I live. Maybe they just don't exist in this neighborhood.
Yeah, maybe they just get chased away. I don't know.
I feel very attacked this episode. I just want to point this out. I feel extremely attacked.
Perhaps there's just too many pine martens in the area.
I've never seen a pine marten either.
We would like to apologize to the pine marten community. Why do we always do this? Why do we always make assumptions about certain animals?
Because that's how zooarchaeology works.
I mean, at least you can't have introduced fish, right? There's no introduced fish.
You can just chuck it real hard.
Across the sea. Yeah. It's still the same sea, Alex.
When I first moved here, I took a handful of fish from the Long Island Sound and I just chucked it real hard. Out of the plane. I don't know. We're very sick in this house right now. The flu's coming around. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore.
Simona, can you have introduced fish? Does that make sense?
I mean, if you buy an aquarium and you put some fish in it,
I'm pretty sure you can. Actually, as long as it's, because obviously there's the freshwater, saltwater difference, but as long as you have that correct, you could technically do it. Actually, no, wait, isn't catfish in some places been introduced?
Really? Oh, okay.
I think so.
Maybe.
But then
Sorry,
again,
we should have probably done research about this.
Well, actually, I was actually wondering, right? As this is like a more legitimate tangent. This is not just a here's a silly thing I thought of or I wasn't listening. You know how climate change is an inevitable part of our modern life. I'm just wondering when the climate changes enough for habitats to change, which it currently has, and animals that previously weren't able to live somewhere. Are they native or introduced animals if they now occupy spaces they didn't before because of the changing conditions of climate?
Well, I mean, I guess
But they're still not
humans...
native.
I mean, yeah, humans are the reason why the climate's changing. So I guess that technically falls under the definition of an introduced species. But I guess it's more of a long-term thing where if, thousands and thousands of years from now, if anyone is still existing on this planet, they can probably say, oh, well, back then they didn't have, elephants in the middle of Manhattan. But now we do, and they've lived here for thousands of years, so they're basically native now. So it's a long time thing,
Yeah.
More speculative, I guess, really, than anything. It's too bad there's no squirrels around in Britain, though, but someone should introduce them.
I mean, it's not funny if you try and play the joke yourself. I think this is like the chili thing.
I'm trying to take control of it.
You can't.
No.
Oh, dear. So, Simona, what if you could introduce an animal to the UK, which animal would it be? Go on. Give us something that should be introduced to the UK.
Lynx.
Why the lynx? Go on.
It's native to Britain, it's been here before, and it probably wouldn't have that much of an impact on the population. And I'm taking this way more seriously than I should have, haven't I?
No. Keep going. I'm actually genuinely interested because obviously the lynx is not no longer native, but it's an extinct species in the UK because obviously, I don't know, was hunted to extinction, was like killed for farmland or whatever. Bringing it back, I mean, is it, we're renativizing it? I mean, I don't know what the term is, but if it's been away for so long... Sorry,
Yeah.
rewilding.
Their introduction of the lynx is part of a rewilding campaign. That's so looking at introducing the lynx to Scotland specifically.
Yeah, so you said you don't think it'll actually have that much of an effect, but it's not been around for such a long time, and, animals in that time have then adjusted to it not being there. What makes you say it might not have such a big effect?
Just because comparatively at looking at countries with similar densities and what the behaviour of the lynx is, because the lynx, is a fairly shy predator that's not going to go out of its way and assault a family that's camping, if that makes sense. Like, it's not as problematic as other predators that may actively attack and prey on humans. The lynx sort of keeps to itself, and the
Sorry.
Wolves can do, but again, I'm not a behaviourist or biologist, so probably not the best person to ask. But the wolf is definitely slightly more problematic than the lynx. I honestly don't know.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, it's just I know that they want to really introduce the wolf, that's all.
We are basically, like, me and Simona, we're kind of just half of this discussion because, like I said before, applied to archaeology is a thing, but it works hand in hand with active conservation methods right now and active studies in the behaviors and biology of these animals that they want to reintroduce. So realistically, I guess, like, me and Simona couldn't necessarily give Simona probably more than me, but we can only say really like the past of this animal, and you have to leave it up to someone who's biologist or ecologist to fill in the blanks of what happens if we reapply it into today.
It's good. You'll have to see, the landscape has changed, and of course our population density has changed, and there's a whole series of factors, and also looking, if the animal does end up preying on livestock, what system are you going to be putting in place to compensate the farmers? Because, that could throw a very well thought of breeding plan out of the window, and that is not just the loss of your livestock, that's a lot of money. That's a bother. So, systems should be put in place, and so it's a lot more complicated than just thinking, oh, there used to be mammoths here 3,000 years ago, so we should probably engineer some and bring them to Britain. Because that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's there's a lot more at play than just merely looking at what species were native, because it doesn't automatically mean that the environment will be as the same as it used to be and that species would thrive like it once did, if that makes sense.
No, that's a really good point. I mean, I would love to have mammoths back. Like I'm totally up for that. Or maybe a mastodon or two as well. That would be cool. But I don't think they'll survive the UK summer. Not with how it's been recently.
If you go back far enough, we had hippos, so bring some of them as well.
No. Stop the tape. When did we have hippos?
Back 200,000 years ago.
Yeah, well, they actually, in where I live, I'm not going to dox myself, but just saying, where I live, there was a little not monument, but like a little sign where they found hippo bones. So
cool.
I'm sure they found hippos under Trafalgar Square as well.
Yeah, I don't live in Trafalgar Square, so ha.
No, you're not a pigeon.
There are pigeons here?
So hippos are native to the UK. Squirrels are
technically
not. They don't exist. Squirrels are a conspiracy, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. I don't know where this has gone. This show has gone really weird. So I feel like we've completely inverted everything we were saying at the start. What's real anymore, guys?
It really is though. I think if anything, that's a running theme is that it is a set of like perspective in terms of like when do you consider something native or introduced, or if you're me, if you actually notice the animal at all. So it's all in our minds, y'all.
That was our ploy all along, just making everyone question everything.
Anyway, I guess that's a good way to wrap up. This was all definitely a joke, and I was definitely joking when I said the squirrel story, so please don't take away my PhD. Remember to like and share and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get podcasts, or you can also listen to us, of course, at archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Anything else, Simona? Oh, follow us on Twitter, Obs.
I love chili.
Squirrel chili.
Oh no.
That's it. That's a t-shirt. It's just squirrel chili.
No, hippo chili. Hippos are native to the UK. Debate me. Change my mind.
Thank you for listening to Archaeo Animals. Please subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. You can find us on Twitter at Archaeo Animals. Also, the views expressed on the podcast are those of ourselves, the hosts and guests, and do not necessarily represent those of our institution, employers, and the Archaeology Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Do you guys think hippo tastes good?
It probably does. I mean, come on, that's like meaty. It's like, hippos are meaty. They're like just water cows, aren't they?
I guess. If anyone's eaten a hippo, can you like send us a message on Twitter, please? Thank you.
I don't like where this is going.
I just want to know. I just want to talk to you.
Just pretend it's for your reference collection. That'll get it through customs. Right, let's wrap this up properly. Thank you to everybody who was listening. It's been Alex and Simona here on Archaeo Animals. Share it with everybody, and I mean absolutely everybody. Your parents, your grandparents, your relatives, anybody who cares about you, share this episode and all the other ones. There's ones about fish bones, there's ones about cats, there's ones about dogs, there's ones about sheep, there's ones about deer, lots of deer, fallow deer, and not so fallow deer. So yeah, it's everything, and yeah, you should definitely share it around. Anything you guys want to say before we go?
Please don't send this to any of my PhD supervisors. I don't want them to know that I have not noticed squirrels until now. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.